Hello and welcome to News in Depth here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Russia's President Vladimir Putin is in India, and his visit comes at a moment when both Russia and India try to safeguard their most critical interests. For Moscow, the trip signals that Russia is not isolated and still has major partners. For India, it's a careful effort to maintain the country's decades-old ties with Moscow while dealing with the pressure from Trump-era tariffs and sanctions. Now in studio here with me to discuss this trip and the latest developments is Stuart Dowell, political editor at TVP World. Stuart, welcome to News in Depth. So what do you make of this meeting? I mean, is this driven by symbolism, closer ties? What is Putin trying to achieve here?
Well, symbolism, not so much. This is an example, I think, of very, very hard power international politics going on. India's objective, I'll start with India if I can, is to maintain its strategic autonomy. Its traditional posture internationally is its policy of multipolarity. It aims to be a pole in a multipolar world. They even have a word for it, a phrase for it in India, which is to be a friend of the world. India's greatest fear is to be pulled into a block as a junior partner with some other power. So this is what India's priority is in this meeting. Russia, on the other hand, as you said in your introduction, it gives Vladimir Putin legitimacy on the international stage. He's already got a lot of that after his meeting with Trump in Alaska. He kind of broke the freeze on himself.
Although not much came out of that Alaska trip, it was more, show and tell, if that's what. If that's what
exactly,
we can call it.
Exactly. But, he had, that's when there was a lot of symbolism.
Right.
Putin was shown, given the red carpet treatment, so he broke his international isolation. And now, coming off of the failed or the stalled peace process talks, which I think was exactly how Russia and Putin wanted it. It's kind of a success for Putin that he stayed firm, didn't give in, and the talks broke down. He can go to India and be on the world stage and show everyone that he can go to another major power in the world and be greeted, and that he has many partners outside of the West.
Stuart, is timing a factor here? I mean, do correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that this is Putin's first trip to India since the full-scale invasion, right, of Ukraine?
Yeah, that's right. It's his first trip to India. He met Modi in Beijing a while ago, and there were some pictures of President Xi, Modi, and Putin laughing and getting along fine together. It comes at that time.
So what about, I want you to tell me a little bit about the partnership, and if you think is going to also become somewhat transactional. Is this a possibility?
For sure. Each side has things that they want to gain. From India's point of view, it has a lot that it wants to gain.
Defense deals, maybe.
Defense deals, yeah. India traditionally bases its armed forces on Russian equipment. I think something like 60% of its equipment, or at least the platforms on which the equipment rests, are Russian. It's an interesting fact that the Indians are the only country to build the MiG-29 on license outside of Russia and the Soviet Union. So the defense ties really go back a long time. And now India is very keen to get replacement parts for the Russian S-400 anti-air defense It wants the S-500, and that gives it a lot of kind of peace of mind and security against China, which is up on its north and northeastern border. And it's also interesting that it uses this equipment, as we saw earlier in the year, in this kind of mini war that they had with Pakistan, which is a kind of an air war. A lot of that equipment was used, so the Indians really need it. And in addition to that, they'll be talking as well about nuclear. Russia is building India's nuclear power capability, so that's very important for them. And the international chaos that's going on affects the leverage of how good those deals can be.
You're talking about China, you're talking about, of course, an international chaos. I really like the words that you use there, Stuart. Let me ask you first about the international chaos and the fact that, India is hosting Russia. Do you think Indian ties right now, India's ties, Modi's ties, are going to kind of begin moving away from the West? I mean, how is the West viewing, and particularly the United States, viewing this meeting between Putin and Modi?
Well, India will be trying not to move away from anyone, but to keep its relations with all those power centres good and proper. It has a relationship with China that's become a little bit warmer after Modi travelled to China a few months ago to Beijing. But having a good outcome, the meeting with Russia will improve, give India leverage in that relationship, and of course, a lot of analysts are talking at the moment how at this meeting India is walking a tightrope. Of course, it needs things from Russia. It wants the energy and the oil. It wants the military and the nuclear that we talked about, but it doesn't want to annoy the Americans. It's already annoyed the Americans. That's why they have 50% tariffs. But it doesn't want to annoy them anymore. The problem that India has is that American policy is very unpredictable. It's chaotic. It's hard to really tell who's pulling the shots in Washington, who's calling the shots in Washington at the moment. So India is trying to balance that. So I think walking a tightrope is a good analogy.
Balancing, I mean, it's also an interesting word that you use, but I mean, is India, do you think, aligning with Russia's stance on its war that it's waging in Ukraine?
India typically is neutral in the war in Ukraine. It notably has been neutral on many of the United Nations motions that have been passed. It talks very persuasively about how it wants diplomacy to win out, how talking is the way to go. But we shouldn't expect India to fall into line with the West on values and morality. It'd be nice if they did. But over many years, if you observe what Indian diplomats and representatives say, they're always pointing out that India has its own strategic national interests, like any country. It follows them, and it's you get the sense that it's frustrating for them that other powers, particularly in the West, kind of don't see that. They have to point it out all the time that yes, India has national interests as well, and it will follow them.
Let me ask you about oil. Is this going to be a topic here of discussion?
Highly likely, yes. India wants to find a way to carry on buying oil. The Trump administration calls India the laundromat that it processes the oil and sells it on and makes a lot of money that way. That's kind of closed down a bit after Trump's sanctions on the two Russian oil companies, but it will be looking for ways to avoid buying from different sources, maybe from different entities in Russia, but not to antagonize Washington too much. It also has to be careful of its how all this looks to Europe. In recent sanctions packages from Europe, they've started to add Indian entities onto those sanction packages. So Europe's aware and looking at that now, and of course it doesn't want to annoy Europe as well.
Stuart, you mentioned China earlier on. I want to ask you, how do you think Russia's growing dependence on China militarily and economically actually changed India's leverage in its dealings with Moscow?
Probably a lot. You're right to point out that Russia
In what way?
Is very dependent on China. Many analysts say that Russia wouldn't be able to conduct its war against Ukraine without Chinese equipment, electronics, chips, dual-use products, all that
Technology,
stuff.
everything.
Yeah, and Russia needs this relationship with Russia to not become a vassal state of China, not to become simply a junior partner and being played like a puppet on a string. So, by going to New Delhi and meeting with a major power of the global South, it's a hedge against China. And as well, it's a hedge for India as well. It also has a power dynamic with China.
How do you think domestic political factors in India influence India's willingness to stand out closer to Putin?
How? Well, they have their own internal dynamics, but Modi will be directed, I suspect that Modi will be directed not so much by internal electoral opinion dynamics and opinion polls, but on hard power in international relations.
So you think it's going to be a win-win situation? I mean, both this meeting that's going to that is taking place right now between Modi and Putin. This is going to be a win-win situation.
Yeah, both leaders want the meeting to happen. They both have things to gain from it, and I'm sure they'll get those things. It's interesting to point out as well that one of the things that Russia is hoping to get is a deal to receive lots of labour, which is very short of, because its men are either fighting in the war or they've fled the country. There's a huge labour shortage, and Russia is seeking a kind of contract where India will supply up to 3 million labourers up to 2030. So that will be a big win for Russia. But with the dynamics as they are, India will make sure it gets a good deal on that.
Stuart, do you think that the fact that Russia is so closely depending on China and aligning with China, and that's eventually going to force India into making some sort of uncomfortable strategic choices in the long run?
India will have to make uncomfortable strategic choices, probably, yeah, because we're now. What's interesting about this meeting is that it's taken. India's very good at juggling this multipolarity, but what's happening now is that the world order that we've had since the end of the Cold War is collapsing. Some people say it's been collapsing for years and years, but it's really come into focus this year. So there's a huge amount of unpredictability in the situation, and like we talked about before.
Can you say that you blame? I mean, for this, you're saying unpredictability. Are you saying that you? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I mean unpredictability coming from the White House.
Yeah, sure. From the White House, I think because we're going through this process of moving from a unipolar world after the end of the Cold War. Now we're in terms of hard power, military power. I guess we're in a bipolar world, America and China. But in terms of other things that are important in the world, like trade, like capital, like technology, IT, which India is very good, big exporter. And also with weaponry, we've seen with drone technology how smaller countries can get a bigger kick out of smaller budgets. In terms of those things, the world is increasingly multipolar. A lot of people are talking now about the race towards artificial general intelligence and how it's a zero-sum game, that the whole of American effort and Chinese effort and the effort of their economies, and therefore every other policy is focused on gaining this this defining, history-winning advantage that this technology will allegedly give. And that would be bad for India and other major powers. So that's the situation that India's trying to navigate, and this meeting is a small part of that.
So you're talking about technology and so forth, but now what are the realistic limits of this Russia-India cooperation in all these different sectors? I mean, you mentioned technology, artificial intelligence, and whatnot. Given the fact that the West has put sanctions, right, and Western export controls, and particularly also Russian sanctions, do you think that the West is going to be able to somehow stop this from moving forward?
Well, stopping trade, the contacts between Russia and India, I think that obviously it's tried to stop the oil trade. It's kind of interesting why, because the United States has had a lot of possibilities of putting pressure on Russia over the war in Ukraine, and it's only really done one thing, which is the sanctions on the two oil companies. The problem that India has is that the trade balance is very imbalanced. It buys about $70 billion worth of oil from Russia. That's probably dipped down recently because of sanctions, and it exports about $5 billion worth of stuff. So one of the subjects at the talks for sure will be how India can improve that balance, and it will want to export more pharmaceuticals that the Indians make a lot of, agricultural products, probably not high tech, and also on the other side, what really does Russia have to sell to India apart from oil and gas? It doesn't really have any of those kind of mid to high level products that India needs.
Well, nothing to sell, but it definitely wants its men, and for the workforce.
Yeah.
Stuart, one more quick question before I let you go. How do you think that Russia's? I mean, clearly, Putin is there. Putin is India. Where you're talking about, of course, Russia's economic struggles, shortage of manpower because their Russian men, soldiers are fighting, fighting in Ukraine. Do you think that all of this in Russia is actually going to reshape the balance of power in the relationship between India and Russia moving forward?
Rebalance.
It's a key word here, of course.
Yeah, I think that the outcome will probably favour India. If there is a rebalancing, it won't be large, but it will be slightly in India's favour because it has more leverage going into the meeting.
Thank you so much, Stuart Dowell, political editor at TVP World, for breaking it down for us here on News and Death. And that's all for this edition of News and Death here on TVP World. I'm Skaya. Thanks for watching, and stay with us here for more news and analysis.